I want to get Matt Episcopo back in. First of all, though, I want Bill Morehouse just made a statement. I want you to read it.
Well, it's a collection of statements here, but basically he says, this is the biggest hit job ever. Come on, stop this nonsense. You know you asked this woman to come on to set her up with a joke.
That is absolutely not true. And it wasn't a joke, Bill Morehouse. Look in the mirror. Give me a break. This is going after someone's family and claiming without any evidence whatsoever, except for a rumor that's been lingering for 10 years, going after his family. It's more important. It's not a joke. And when we brought her on, let me give you the background on this. We had an opportunity then to bring in Matt Episcopo. And you told Matt what? Matt's not even living in this area. He's not from here either right now.
I said there's a report that this woman submitted who claims to be a deception detector or some sort of expert that's claiming that Tony Picenti was lying in his 5-minute response to Dave Gordon's press conference. And in true journalistic fashion, we wanted to get a second opinion on it.
And
I sent him the video.
Pick one side. He doesn't know Dave Gordon. I don't know that he knows Tony Picenti necessarily. He certainly has worked in law enforcement here in Madison County.
He saw the same video she did.
And with that said, we brought Matt on, and this was not intended to be a hit job, Bill. Give me and I understand what it looked like to you, but that's not what it was. The fact is, if someone made a false claim and people are going to read that and put credence into it and believe that it's an authentic assessment, I think we should bring in an expert who really is an expert in the field to give his or her assessment. And that's what we did with Matt here, which is why I think Matt coming on is important. This is a guy who's been trained in this field. This is a woman who travels the country as a charlatan doing speeches and writing books and making money. That's what she does. There's a difference between that and Matt, who's somebody is in law enforcement, in my opinion. And with that said, I'll bring Matt back into this. And I want your assessment of her assessment, if you could, Matt.
Sure. First, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep, I've got you.
Okay, perfect. So the thing that I have to say is, again, to give credence to my background, is I'm actually a trainer of people that are conducting interviews and interrogations. This is my expertise. So when someone is saying, I don't want to be prepared and I just want to look at something, you absolutely need a preparation is the key to success. You actually need to know all the information so that you can put things into context. Also, for anybody just to say, I'm going to watch a clip and make a determination that someone is deceptive is complete nonsense, because you can say, I believe someone is showing signs of deception, but you can't say definitive that they're lying. You have to have corroboration, right? So, again, as I said, if you guys were to call me up and say, Matt, we want you to watch this video and we want you to make a determination based on this video, I would say I can't do it. And anyone that's worth their weight in salt would tell you the exact same thing.
Yep.
They're not going to put their reputation on the line and say, I'm going to watch a video and I'm going to make a determination for fact based on this and this alone, because as we all know, there's so many other factors involved, and that's why in an interview and interrogation process, you have the benefit of going back and forth. So what will happen is when somebody gives me an indication of deception, then I have to come back to that and say, okay, was the deception shown because maybe the question I asked, they didn't get it and they're a little bit confused about the question? Is it based on something else? Somebody can show signs of anger for different reasons, but then you have to get in and weed out, okay, what are you angry about?
Right.
And it could be that someone's just angry because they are deceptive, but it doesn't mean because they're angry they are deceptive.
So, and especially in a situation like this where you're dealing with these accusations that have been pelted over the course of several weeks, and that's why I had asked her the question, couldn't his anger be just the fact that he's exhausted from this, and not necessarily that he's lying? Isn't that a possibility? And she
Absolutely.
she said no to that.
But see, and that's why I'm not being mean. But when somebody is saying, based on my training and this and that, she's got limited training. She does. And she has had the benefit of sitting down nose to nose with criminals and rapists and murderers and having to go on the stand and being grilled by other experts and defense attorneys and having testimony stand up under the toughest scrutiny. So when you actually do this for a living and you do it case by case by case by case, you can say that nothing is 100%. Right? It's one of those things where even when you get the truth from somebody, it's never all of it.
Right.
It's never all of it. There's always more. So for someone to say that when I said, okay, he held the report up and closed his eyes, that actually could be a sign of deception. That's fair enough. It could be because somebody could want to distance themselves from something that's potentially guilty. At the same point, when I say, could it be that he's gathering his thoughts in that moment? And she says, no. Well, that's absolutely just not true. It could be both of those, but that's why you then have to find out which is it. So you can't just say it's this, therefore it means that.
And before you go, Jeff, I want to. Matt Episcopo is someone that was trained in this type of in this field. Worked at the Madison County Sheriff's Department, and is somebody who's been on this program several times talking about this issue. But when you're and I want to give you just a bit of background, and maybe this would help Bill Morehouse out there. Initially, I had asked Andrew to book Matt because we don't know. I'm not an expert in this field, and this woman is probably going to come on and say that she supports, obviously, everything in her report. But I wanted an expert to come in and give his or her opinion, not knowing what you were going to say, Matt. At some point, about 7:20 this morning, Andrew said to me, Matt is able to come on. I was going to have you on after her, and you said that Matt wanted to come on during,
right,
while she was on the air. And Matt, I want you to explain why you wanted to do that after you read her report and figured out the background in this case.
Well, because I think that if I didn't, number one, I didn't want it to seem like it was a setup or sabotage. I rather, if somebody has something to say, have them have the opportunity to address me in real time, right? Because I don't think it would be fair for her to come on and say the things that she has to say. Then I have the luxury of having the last word. Just,
right.
You know what I mean? So I rather say, here's what I think, and if you have something to dispute that based on fact, right, then go for it, because the truth stands on its own. And you have to understand, in law enforcement professionals, they are in pursuit of the truth, and you should have just as much satisfaction finding someone guilty and having the proof of it, as well as exonerating the innocent.
And then finally,
that should be equally satisfying, because the truth is what you're in pursuit of.
And then finally, did there come a point where you felt that she was being irresponsible?
It is, because when you watch a video and you say, I'm going to make a determination, it's the way that she phrased this. And I could literally go line by line picking this thing apart, but there could be, when you're saying could be and these kinds of things, there are escape hatches. So based on her own language and her own report, she does not believe that this is true 100%, or she wouldn't use the language that she used.
All right. Manaski.
All right, I have two questions. One, can you talk about the difference when somebody makes it? Well, let me ask you this first. You said you've been called in and you've been on juries before, or before juries before. Does this fall into the category of a lie detector test that's not admissible in court, or have you been called to testify that so-and-so made a statement, Deputy Episcopo interviewed this person and he believes he's lying? Is what you do in that regard admissible in court? I guess I'm just curious. It doesn't relate to this case, but...
Yeah, so... No, let me weed through that a little bit, because you have a few different questions in there. So, first of all, lie detectors are not admissible in court because
Correct.
They haven't been given what's called judicial notice. Judicial notice is basically both the prosecution and the defense say this is a scientific instrument and we believe in the technology and we say it's okay, so the results are admissible in court. So lie detectors, and there's many different forms of them, polygraph being one, voice stress analyzer being another. There's many different forms of lie detectors. They are not admissible in court because all they do is detect stress, really. When it's picking up on something, it's picking up on somebody is under stress at that point, and stress is ambiguous and it has to be interpreted. That's why you need someone in real time to testify based on your observations. So now moving forward, police officers are not allowed to give opinions. They can only state, here are my observations. The only person in a court of law that's able to give an opinion is someone who has been certified or accepted by court as an expert, and that means, again, both the prosecution and defense have the chance to examine that witness and ask very specific questions and to establish their credibility. And when both sides agree, yes, this person has the knowledge in this specific field, we will accept them as an expert, and only then can they give an opinion.
Okay, and then can I ask you something else? What's the difference in a statement versus a question? And I'm going to throw in another one, too. How much does it matter the history of somebody? Like, you know how they tend to respond to something versus you're just seeing someone on a video for the first time?
Sure. So, again, could someone show signs of deception when giving a statement? Sure they can. They absolutely can. But, again, remember, that's something that someone is looking to say versus being questioned. Many times when you question somebody and they don't necessarily know what the question is, reading body language, you're actually looking at how they're reacting to that question. When someone is giving a statement, you don't have that benefit.
Right.
And based on the video that you saw, which is the same video that this Tracy Brown saw, can you tell us if Tony Picenti was telling the truth?
No, I couldn't go there because it's one of those things, again, where if someone's going to ask me, watch this video, and based on this video, tell me is someone telling the truth or deception, I'm just not going to go there because there's so many factors.
And which is why I feel that this is 100% justified. I'm sorry, I stand by what we did, and it did kind of unfold organically. I get it, but the fact that she's trying to make a statement of guilt based on a video that she watched on YouTube,
that she probably got right there,
and that some people are going to accept as fact from an expert is horrific. As far as I'm concerned, it's terrible. So it is our job to be able to bring someone on that can give an opposing opinion, one that we trust as an expert opinion. And Matt, I'll reiterate this: you're not saying Tony Picenti went up to the podium and told the truth, but you're also not saying that he came up to the podium and he lied. And to me, just like the accusation itself, there is absolutely zero proof. And for that makes this just all the more horrible. And that's why I just think that this is just a sad state of politics. I don't know what's happened since you left here, Matt, but this is really, we have reached new lows here. It's just, and again, for the record, I don't know whether or not Tony Picenti had an affair. I have no clue. I would not be willing to say he did or didn't. But if someone says I didn't do it and you have no proof, no real proof to prove that they did, what is the only option for you? Is to accept their answer.
And find a real issue to run on and move
on. Can I just, Morehouse chimed in as well. He says he thought this was quackery. My point was that why would you bring
the
this
report
woman
or
on?
the segment?
She's a scammer.
Okay,
that's what
Bill's saying. Yeah. All right, well, then you kind of agree with me, Bill. Then I'm sorry about that.
$200 for a report.
Send me a fly swatter, and we'll call it even. Matt, do you want to conclude anything on any? I have to tell you something. When my brother passed away, this was 1986, and it was public. And when I was on the radio, a psychic came out and got information about my family and reached out to my mother. I, from this day forward, have zero tolerance for, and I mean, she knew stuff. And it was to the point where people were falling for it. My family was falling for this. And I'm like, what? This is all public information that she can grab, even back in the 1980s. From that day forward, I have zero tolerance for this sort of thing. And I group this woman right into the same category as a psychic. You're putting on a show and you're selling it, and you're selling interviews and you're selling books, and you have no real background like Matt has, who's trained in this. Can you talk about that, Matt? I lump her in the same category.
Yeah. So, again, in all fairness, I also do speaking and sell books and this and that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to. I apologize for that. But you had the credentials to do it.
But see, this is the thing. So I would ask, do you have her report in front of you?
Yeah.
Andrew does, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so under her name, what's the very last title underneath her name?
Body language expert, keynote speaker, champion athlete.
So champion athlete.
But she was a three-time U.S. collegiate cycling champion
right.
and a member of the U.S. Olympic team.
What I would say is, if she wanted to talk about cycling, right? I'm just being fair. If she wanted to talk about cycling, I would not doubt for 1 minute that she's an expert in cycling, because she actually reached Olympic heights, and you can't dispute her knowledge in that area because she actually did it. That was what she did as an athlete. She has the training, the experience. She can talk about it. You can't dispute those facts. When you're talking about something like body language, I could say something and somebody can actually dispute the facts with me because, again, it's ambiguous. You have to interpret it.
Yeah. So
that's why you always like to corroborate what you're saying. That's really super important. So having other forms of evidence. In New York State, you need one of three things to go to court. You either need an eyewitness, physical evidence, or a confession. Those are the three things you have. So as an interviewer, an interrogator, many times you don't have an eyewitness or physical evidence to go into court with, and the only thing you can get is the confession. And the defense knows if we can discredit that confession and throw it out, you have no case. So it's really important to be able to corroborate the things that you say. And it's just irresponsible for somebody and to go out and watch a video and say, for a fact, this is what's going on. I think if you're an expert in something, and if you talk to any other, and I would invite you, call in other experts, call in other people who have served in law enforcement who have done this.
Yeah.
They will tell you the exact same thing that I'm telling you. It's not just me. It's people that are in the business that know what they're doing. They would say to you the exact same thing. You have to have proof of things to go in and say, I think they're lying because they did this, and base everything just on that.
Right.
Just irresponsible.
And the other, and you mentioned the word irresponsible, and I'll wrap this up here. To me, that's the problem I have with a psychic. When you're taking advantage of someone's very tender time, very emotional time after a death in the family or something like that. When you're talking about the seriousness of life and death as a psychic, and some of these irresponsibly, some of these psychics do that. It's not the same thing as there is the woman that always comes to the Stanley. What's her name? And whatever her name is. But she's always saying things like, yeah, your dad wants you to know that he loved you. And it's all very safe, carefully calculated. This is basically saying, this is condemning someone. And that's the irresponsibility here.
Well, and I think there's some. And I don't want to
one example too, because a common thing that everyone loves in body language, because it's a very easy thing for people to learn a little bit about, but then you have to take the practical application of it. So a common sign that people see is when someone folds their arms, right? Everyone goes, "Ooh, it's a barrier." You know, they're not listening to your ideas and this.
Yeah,
and
they're
that.
not open. Right.
So but at the same point, it very well could mean they're cold.
Right.
You cannot look at someone and say, I saw them in this video with their arms folded, and that's a classic case of deception, therefore they're lying. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think there's an element of, as Morehouse had used this line, quackery here. And I just think it's interesting, like, is there even a possibility that I pay someone for the report and they come back not favorable to me. I think she was kind of alluding to that in the beginning. I didn't know this guy was going against this guy.
Right.
I was just giving my honest opinion, but I don't know if I'm.
And it's one thing for a radio
this is
station
a
like ours to bring in somebody like Matt and say, "Is the president lying? Or is this senator who's claiming that he didn't do A, B, and C?" Because we've done stuff like that. It's done in kind of a lighthearted, fun way.
Yeah, we had Matt on with the Tony's handshake with Obama.
Correct. Matt's opinion is not going to sway anything and certainly not cause any damage. But if you're going to come in and...
This is his evidence.
Correct.
This is his evidence.
This is his evidence. To me, there is such a potential for this to cause damage, it becomes extremely irresponsible. So I cannot thank you enough, Matt, for being a part of this. I'm sorry that it ended up looking as if there was an ambush going on here, and we'd plotted this whole thing when I was meeting for breakfast this morning with Tony Pisani, which didn't ever happen, for the record. I'm sorry it looked that way, but I don't know any other way to have pulled this off. I don't, and I appreciate you being a part of this.
No problem. All I'm saying is if someone's going to make an observation, at least say what it could be and what it could not be. At least give both sides and let people form their opinions. You can say, based on what I'm seeing, I see this, and this. But at the same point, it could mean other things, right? I mean,
yes,
at least give both. Don't just nail it down and say, therefore, it is this.
Her assessment was irresponsibly absolute for the information given to her.
Right.
And that is nothing but irresponsible, or as Bill Morehouse calls it, quackery. Matt Episcopo, great hearing from you. Hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon.
Very good. Thank you for having me on.
Under different circumstances, I'm sure. So, all right, Matt, thanks so much.